I grew up in a very military family. My dad is a retired drill sergeant. My brother's an Army Ranger. My sister was a interrogator for the Army. So it's a heavily military family structure, but we never had guns in the house. I to this day have never touched a gun, have no desire to touch a gun, but am very aware of how guns function in institutional spaces. So the way that I enter into this conversation is that even knowing that so many people in my family have served in the military, I come from a very solidly middle-class background. I remember having conversations with my friends, my other Black friends in this predominantly white neighborhood that we grew up in, about the conversation our parents had with us about what to do when you got pulled over by the police. Not if you got pulled over by the police, but when you got pulled over by the police. And that was the first conversation that we had before you learned how to drive. This was the most important and crucial information for us to know. And so it has always made me hyper aware of my fear of guns in the hands of institutions, right? So there's all this conversation about what happens when everyday citizens are managing guns. But there's a different conversation when guns in the hands of people in power who've been given license to hold these guns pose a threat to your very embodiment. So that's the way that I've entered into this. And so when I think about a Trayvon Martin who, when we think about George Zimmerman, was empowered by Florida law to act with a gun, right? I took a different approach. So I'm intrigued by these women in the Hebrew Bible, particularly the figure of Rizpah in Samuel, and how she calls institutions and structures to task for how they proliferate violence. So how do we legitimize a gun culture? How does the government legitimize a gun culture without being held accountable for its role? And then what do we see happening with parents, particularly women, moms, who are taking agency to make their lament prophetic, such that it brings to bear what the government's role is in causing the death of their children, right? So we are now seeing Michael Brown's mother, Jordan Davis' mother, enter into politics on the issue of gun control, and that has enough traction in the public sphere because this issue has become so dominant. And so have we not seen enough grief at the hands of the way that the government has normalized guns and power? And how do we call people to different action in a different system that is not so compelled by this kind of Christian gun proliferation ethos?